Hi, everybody. My name's Adam Gilbert with Blueberry Creative, and today I'm going to be talking to Perry Vaile, who is a fine art wedding film photographer here in North Carolina that specializes in all things awesome weddings, destinations. She does beautiful work. So I will hand it over to Perry and just, I guess, tell us a little bit about yourself and kind of what you do in the wedding world.
Awesome. Okay, so I've been shooting weddings for just about a decade now. So right after my own wedding 10 years ago. And I work mostly in the Southeast, but I think just like you guys, like I kind of end up everywhere. And it's been really fun. So it's mostly my focus is on weddings because it's just the thrill and the challenge of everything happening live, you know? So that's mostly what I do versus, portraits. I put all my eggs in the wedding basket for sure.
Awesome. Well, I'd like to talk to you. This is kind of, I guess, going to be centered a little bit about this particular moment in time, which is we're filming this in early May of 2020. So everybody knows what that means, I guess. I don't think it needs much of an explanation, but could you, I guess, briefly describe a little bit about what's been going on and how you've been able to work with the coronavirus, COVID-19, and all that stuff?
So I think that, it all really kind of started for me in mid-March, right when, basically everything went down, where venues were, I guess, everything was being restricted to group gatherings, which has never happened to my memory, nothing even equivalent to this, in terms of the wedding world. And nobody knew for how long or what it meant. And it was just so much at once. I think I had that first day, the first Monday after everything happened, I had 5 postponements in a day.
Oh, wow.
And I had 9 that first, we were just about 9 in the first week or two after everything happened. And that one day, I had one and I would get off this phone call talking to this planner bride and I would get another phone call and I was like, oh my gosh, so much is happening. And, now that we're in May, it's been almost 2 months. We're just shy of 2 months now. So we've all kind of settled into, I guess, it's normalized what's happening to some extent because we're getting used to it. And, the news ticker and everything that's happening with weddings. I shot one wedding. I had one stay on, but they just had the couple and their parents.
Oh.
And, so it was just like a little elopement in the backyard. So it was thrilling because I had missed weddings so much, without even realizing it, because so much else is happening. And then when I got there, I was near tears with excitement. I was like, oh, wait, they're gonna get married, So I think it's been interesting to see how clients are all reacting in different ways and what they're all deciding to do different things, based on what they had originally planned. So it's definitely an interesting time to be in the world of large events, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's really great what you said, just being able to get to be a part of a wedding again was such just a thrill to even be there now. And I'm sure that's going to carry over, when the smoke clears from all of this, all of us are going to be so excited just to be able to.
I will never complain about my feet hurting. I will never complain about getting elbowed in the face on a dance floor. I'm just going to be grateful to be at a wedding.
For sure. It puts it in perspective.
Oh, absolutely. For sure.
Okay, let me see. I've got some questions here. So how are you dealing with postponements, and are you noticing trends of what people seem to be doing? And I know you do generally larger events. So how is that working? What's kind of the general consensus with what folks are doing?
I think I mentioned to you, I'm not sure, but I actually had our 10-year vow renewal planned for this summer in July in Ireland. And I had a dress, it was a wedding dress. I had, photo and video, and I had planners. I had the officiant. I had an expensive castle reserved, and all the sort of expectations for what was going to come along with that, seeing my daughters running through the hills with their grandmas and everything that you kind of build on those sorts of life sort of experiences, everything you expect it to be. And then, having to make a decision, be like, well, yeah, that's not going to happen. Like, I think it because that was happening to me at the same time. All my brides were initially having postponement concerns and stuff. So it definitely gave me, I think, the perspective, like I could see where they were coming from and all of their concerns, or even like a feeling of loss, for what they've been looking forward to. So I think that having that sort of perspective has helped me understand where they're coming from. And I've started to see trends where some of them are wanting to still keep some sort of experience on the day that I originally planned. So I would say maybe 40% of my clients so far have said, we're still going to get married on this day. We're going to save our big party and our event for a date to be determined. But they're still kind of having a really intimate, like, sweet ceremony, which is the one that I had mentioned I've been a part of. And it's been so interesting to see how everybody's different dynamics are influencing what they decide to do with that. So, I think the trends have been, I will say, I think that the events for this fall or this summer are going to largely be small. They'll be the intimate ones. But, I'd like to think, and I know I personally, after all of this, like, when we get to have our big weddings again, like, I want to party. Like, I want to celebrate, and I think that even if temporarily we'll have smaller events, I think that the reaction to that is when we have the opportunity to really get together in groups. I think some clients are just going to go for it, like, really, really have fun with it. So.
Absolutely. Yeah, I hope so. Again, like, I just can't wait for that to be our reality again. That's interesting that you said that a lot of people or not, maybe half of your folks are kind of still planning on doing something on their original date. And I think that's a really cool way to, like, okay, this is not our original plan, but we're still going to make this date a special day for us. And then let's get to the party a little bit later when we can.
I think there's a lot of couples that have other logistics built into the time they were going to get married. They were planning to move in together, or, they were planning to move to a new city, or, things like that. And there's so much pressure, especially if an event is postponed far into the future, like next season or something, where they feel like they're not getting out on this experience with who they thought would be their spouse for the next year. So they're like, okay, let's take some of the pressure off. We're going to go ahead and get married, and I'm interested to see how that continues to play out, if more clients will offer that, or if they'll just start postponing, entirely. That's been for the first phase where nobody really knew what was happening, for the first spring phase. So
how, and we can talk about this as much or as little as you want, but when people postpone, I've personally been kind of in, it feels like more of an education position with our clients to tell them, explain them how deposits work, what they're for, how those payments are going to move, and how that affects, we're all kind of small businesses in this as well, and how we need to be able to keep running so that we're there for them in 2021. So if you want to...
For you guys.
Yeah.
I think that part of it is the emphasis of, a retainer or a deposit is used to hold a date. And even when everything goes awry, the date is held. And so for those of us that hold dates, say for next year, we have a finite number of them, especially for those of us like myself who, I'm a single entity wedding photographer. I don't have a large team, which I definitely think those that have teams are in a great position to be able to allow more flexibility, in terms of allowing date changes. I personally, knowing what it's like to feel like everything is thrown off, and then to be the added stress of what is this going to cost, or what is this going to look like? I've basically tried to go above and beyond what my contract says, to do everything I can to remove fees when they are, like, everywhere that I possibly can, short of putting myself out of business to do so. And I think that's just finding ways to, at least for couples, I think one way that they can work to not lose any sort of money on new booking fees, or, every vendor is different in what's required or what they've already spent, for people that have products or things like that. I think that choosing non-peak days, clients have a much higher a possibility of keeping everybody, not losing a penny, keeping all the vendors they loved and they kind of had pictured, in their dream version of their wedding, but also not, causing financial harm to vendors that they love, and certainly not everybody can do that. But I think clients being open to that, if they have any sort of flexibility to allow that, it makes it a lot easier on them and less stressful than the ones that have to go to, say peak Saturdays, for example.
Right.
And it's good, to kind of know everything up front, to know what vendor expenses might be, to move a venue, for example, to change a date on a venue. That I think venues are kind of leading the way on how it's going to work, with dates or things like that, because they can't have 2 or 3 weddings in the same dance hall or the same, field. They can't, they physically can't. So I'm very interested to see for couples. I think a lot of people are moving Saturdays anyways, but I think what's going to happen is those Saturdays, aren't going to last for venues, especially. Those dates are going to be gone, and clients will be deciding if they want to go into a different season or if they're going to be open to, non-Saturdays and stuff like that. So it'll be interesting.
For sure. There's only so many Saturdays in a year, and especially in those peak months that, most people tend to gravitate towards. It's good. Do you think it's going to be competitive? I feel like that's almost redundant for 2021, but do you think,
absolutely. I think, usually I would be at a certain point and I'm already more than double in terms of dates that are off my 2021 calendar because of postponements. And it's a staggering number because we only have so many days that we can physically work on weddings, and once they're gone, there's not a lot we can do. I'm definitely going to be introducing some associates for next year, which I'm excited about, but I think that, it's just a difficult thing. I think I've noticed that it's moving a lot quicker. Venues are losing their dates a lot, infinitely faster than they would have if this didn't happen, because we're now taking all of the spring brides, a chunk of the summer, and then, pieces of the fall have already opted to move to next season. That doesn't even count all of the people that might have done this fall before this happened and they changed their mind. So they're going to 2021. And then all the people that'd be getting married in 2021 anyways, it's just kind of like, it's going to be 2 wedding seasons trying to fit into one calendar year.
Right.
And the sooner the better, for people looking. So.
Well, I think it just takes a level of understanding from the vendors. Obviously, working with clients that have had, planning for years, some of these folks, multiple years to get these events planned, and now they're having to move, but also, understanding that it's kind of like an all hands on deck situation. I feel like this year and next year, we're preparing ourselves to just do whatever it takes to, if we're typically we wouldn't, plan 2 weddings in the same weekend or back to back, because it can, you give yourself so much to these events, but it's just going to be one of those things where you have to do it.
Working twice as hard for half as much.
Yeah. But that's.
We love it. Most of us love weddings, so, I'm willing to work a lot harder next year, and just, honestly, mentally preparing this year. I'm like, okay, I've got to get some gardening in. I've got to get some time with my kids, because next year is going to be a different monster, and it's going to be a different sort of challenge next year for sure. But I think most of us in weddings, we love it so much that I'm hoping just the excitement of being back at it will kind of, carry us through a long, long year for sure. So
yeah, it's definitely going to be interesting. So you kind of touched on this, but I have a question here. Just how would you advise brides to make the postponement decision if their wedding is in the fall or winter of this year, considering how competitive, next year's dates might be? I know that's kind of an impossible question.
I think because there's so many different nuances with every wedding, whether it's the scale or the most important people to a couple, if it's their elderly grandparents, that changes things, and
sure.
I think every single client is managing it differently. To me, I'm trying to give like an honest answer. So I'm really thinking through, I think it's uncertain, right? And we've never been in such a situation, at least in terms of weddings, because even, for example, when difficult things happened, say if there was, say 9/11 in 2001, I wasn't in weddings then, or, I guess the recession in 2008, those things, weddings weren't threatened because people used celebrations to put their mind on good things. And so it's such an odd place to be, where the one thing you need to feel better is what you're not allowed to do, which is be with other people, So, I think that, for couples looking back, if it's 10 or 20 years from now, to make decisions based on what they would think then if they can't. Don't put yourself in the sort of boiling pot of, news tickers and, questions from friends and all of the stuff that I'm sure they're juggling. It's impossible to make decisions in that way. But if they try to look from an outside perspective of, okay, when I'm talking about our 10-year wedding anniversary, what story do I want to tell? Do I want to tell the story of, we moved forward with a smaller guest count? Or do I want to tell the story of we waited a year and had a big blowout party? And everybody's answer, I think, is going to be different. But trying to find perspective in that way, that's the only way I could do it, like as planning what we're looking at, what I was doing, our 10-year vow renewal, I was kind of like, well, I can't necessarily hop on a plane and fly to Ireland that easily with my 2 young children in the middle of it, right now. But if I was doing something locally and it's what we had planned and it was a group that was mandated to be okay or something, it's all a mess, and trying to remove yourself from the mess as much as possible to make the choice is really the only thing we can do. Everybody's guessing at this point,
I think that's so spot on, though, like identifying your priorities, and those are going to change for different folks, but moving towards whatever direction that is. And I think that's really solid advice.
Yeah.
All right, let me see what else here. Sorry, I didn't have all these memorized.
Oh, that's fine. I don't have my answers memorized.
So this is kind of a prediction question, but how do you think events in general will change moving forward? Even, say this is behind us, smaller guest lists, social distancing, those sorts of concepts. Like, what do you think?
I definitely think that the idea of micro weddings or more intimate weddings, I think it'll be more popular, maybe not by necessity, but just because people have been introduced to the idea through this. They've seen friends have to do micro weddings or just more intimate out of necessity, and they see, I guess, the potential, the beauty of that. So I think that there might be more of a world of smaller weddings, but still intentional, design focused or, experience focused weddings. But not necessarily, I definitely think we are going to have smaller weddings in anything that happens in the near future, depending on how the landscape changes. There could be a news update tomorrow that changes everything. I don't know. But I think it'll be more appealing. People will consider it more of an option than they have. But in the same turn, I think I do a lot of really large weddings, like over 200, 300 people. And those that put value on the really large parties may not be satiated with the small ones. They may just wait until they can have that once in a lifetime, big, giant sort of thing. And I think when they do, I'd like to think it's going to feel so good that, the kind of focus on the way that the guest experience, people will really, it's kind of like the cobwebs got cleared up for a little bit, and those who the values kind of help to get more realigned through seeing what matters most, whether people want to have a big party or not, I'm definitely interested to see how it impacts it. That's for sure.
Yeah, I think, I see value on both sides of those, that equation, because we had our wedding was 28 people, I think, and we went to
I love that.
Yeah, we went to Costa Rica with this really tight group of people, and we were there for a week. So, take a budget that would go this far with 75 guests locally, and you can do the same thing with a smaller, but you're providing a different experience. And I'm really excited to see how that changes if, say someone is forced to, if they cut a guest list from 200 to 50, but keep the same budget, then they can provide a different, exceptional experience to those 50 people.
And I think we always, in the wedding industry, we always knew about the beauty of those, right? I mean, obviously that's why you decided to do it. That's kind of an industry secret. I think we all know is those are really awesome to be at and to experience. And I just feel like now more brides and grooms are being opened up to that as an option. Whereas before we all, working in it, we knew those were cool and those were awesome and people loved them, But yeah, I'm hoping that more people see it and see the beauty of them for sure.
Yeah, it's back down to what you said. Priority is just, it's going to depend on what people value. But I think at least people are being at least exposed to that idea and concept that maybe they didn't know about before. So those are my general questions. Do you have other things to add about maybe advice to other vendors, specifically photographers, or I'm a videographer, people in our boat, or things that may resonate with someone?
I think the best advice I can give to the vendors, or really anybody, I guess, is for me, it has really helped me because every day something is new. Every day I was having a postponement or having to deal with some sort of reschedule or something. And I think it helped because it felt like all of these sort of arrows were coming out of nowhere. And I didn't know when the next arrow was going to peg me in the chest, And I kind of, maybe it's working through the stages of grief. I don't know. But once I was able to get through, I kind of essentially said, okay, worst case scenario in terms of how this impacts weddings, what does it look like? And then I prepared my business on the back end, in terms of, all right, let's slide this into savings. This is going to pay my mortgage next year or something like that. I think doing that has really helped me to manage any sort of anxiousness. Now, that's not to say that I don't need a glass of wine a couple times a week right now, but it definitely has helped me say, once I've prepared for that and I said, okay, this is my plan. This is how I can serve my clients to the absolute, best limits of my ability. And then this is what I'm going to have to do. These are the lines I will have to hold just to protect the business. Yeah. Once I kind of had those written out for myself, in a Word document, and said, that has really helped me manage the sort of concern, the daily, inundation with concern and worries that I was facing, because now I'm just prepared. I'm prepared for the worst. And if I get surprised, I'm going to be so happy and so grateful. If the first big bodacious wedding I get to shoot is in August, I will be shocked, but I will be so happy, and I think I definitely leave room for the environment to change, for something that's what happens in history. There's always something that changes the trajectory, so whether that's extending what we're having to go through or shortening it, I don't know. But I think just preparing and not kind of waiting for the wave to wash over you, but preparing for it ahead of time, embracing yourself, I think it really is really helpful.
Yeah, I think that's super wise, just to spend a day or two and really, from a business perspective, you can track your spending, look to see where all of your money is going, determine what is essential and maybe what can be, kind of tinkered with a little bit, and forecast out, long term, and give yourself a plan for success. As well as, I think, something to be said for taking advantage of some of the programs, if possible. I know it's kind of all over the place, but the EIDL program, the PPP program, and even unemployment, if you need to do that as well, there's some options, and hopefully folks have gotten stimulus checks too, but save some money.
Still waiting.
Do what? I'm sorry.
I'm still waiting on mine.
I know. Well, I wish there was more clarity on and more consistency with that, but at least there are options, and I would advise anyone to take advantage of them.
I definitely have been somebody that in the past have been like, I see the acronyms, or I see some news article about what this is, and I'm like, like I don't want a big loan, or it's going to have really high rates, and I just kind of glossed over it. And then it took like a couple of friends of being like, go do this now, like go do it. So if anybody hasn't looked into PPP, or EIDL, or any of those, even I personally think, even if you don't need the loan right now, if you do your projections for the next year in your worst case scenario and say, well, yeah, I mean, actually, I don't think I'm going to need it, but there's something to be said for if you get it. They've got very low interest rates right now, going on for those programs, and being, more safe, I think, especially as vendors, because we also have to protect all of our future clients to have us still, like it's our responsibility to still be at the wedding. And I think it's definitely easier in the photo video side of things to, not have that sort of concern. But for vendors that are doing venues or catering companies where their overhead was so heavy, taking advantage of every single one of these things is going to be really imperative if things go more sideways.
Yeah, and I'm super interested to talk to, I've got a few folks lined up to talk to that are, I have no idea what, goes into a florist company, or like, because they have storefronts, they have, retail spaces or venues. So I think that's really interesting. But for our part with photo and video, like, you can get these things, you can really try to manage your money. Hopefully don't maybe now is not the time to buy that new camera lens. Well, that's great. Well, thank you so much, Perry, for joining me today. I think your insights are incredible. If you don't know Perry's work, go check it out. You will be stunned and amazed. And she's obviously a pleasure to be around too. So thank you so much for doing this.
So wonderful. So I'm glad you had me on.
Absolutely. Well, catch you next time. I don't know. This isn't a show, but